The night was calm, but something in the air felt wrong. The small town lay silent, its houses covered in soft moonlight. Children were sleeping, dogs were quiet, and the world seemed safe. But in one house, a father woke suddenly, his heart racing without reason. He checked the clock. It was past midnight. He listened carefully, and then he realized his daughter's room was silent, too silent. He walked to her door, slowly pushing it open. The bed was empty. The blanket was on the floor, and the window was wide open. His heart stopped for a moment, then started to beat faster. He called her name again and again, but no answer came. He rushed outside into the night, his bare feet hitting the cold ground. He searched the garden, the street, the shadows, but there was no sign of her. Then he saw something strange in the distance. A bright light flashed across the sky like a falling star, but it moved too slowly, too controlled, like a machine. The light vanished behind the dark forest at the edge of the town. Fear mixed with determination inside him. He ran back to the house, grabbed his boots, his jacket, and a flashlight. He had no time to think, no time to ask for help. His daughter was missing, and he would not waste a single second. He followed the road toward the forest. The night was cold, and the wind carried strange sounds. The trees moved like shadows of giants, and the ground crunched under his steps. He kept calling her name, but his voice sounded small in the huge silence. When he reached the forest edge, he stopped. The earth smelled of smoke, and there was a strange mark on the ground. It looked like fire had burned a perfect circle into the grass. The trees nearby were bent, as if something heavy had landed. He walked slowly into the circle, shining his flashlight. His heart beat harder as he saw small footprints in the dirt. They were too small to belong to an adult, too soft to belong to an animal. They were his daughter's footprints, leading deeper into the woods. But there was something else. Beside her tracks were other marks, longer, sharper, not human. The shapes looked like claws or metal legs pressing into the ground. Whatever had taken her, it was not alone. The father felt fear crawl up his spine. He looked into the forest, the trees like tall black towers. Every sound made him turn an owl. A branch snapping, the wind in the leaves. He felt watched, as if unseen eyes followed him from the darkness. Still, he kept walking, step by step. He could not stop. Not when his daughter was out there. The footprints pulled him forward, and the silence pressed against his ears. Then, in the distance, he heard a faint cry. It was soft, broken, almost like a whisper. He froze, listening with all his strength. It was her voice, calling for help, but it was fading. He ran toward the sound, branches cutting his skin, mud pulling at his boots. The cry stopped, and the forest fell silent again. He shouted her name, but only echoes answered. His flashlight flickered, the beam shaking as his hand trembled. Then he noticed something glowing between the trees. He moved closer, breath heavy. It was a piece of metal, shining with strange blue light. He picked it up, feeling warmth and vibration, like it was alive. It had symbols carved into it, symbols he had never seen before. The father knew now this was no normal kidnapping. This was something far beyond human. Aliens or something like them had come for his daughter, and he was the only one who could find her. He looked deeper, into the forest, the tracks, the broken branches. The strange glow all led further in. The darkness seemed endless, but he had no choice. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and stepped forward. Every shadow moved like a living thing. Every sound felt like a warning, but he whispered to himself, "I will find you." And with that, he disappeared into the black heart of the forest. The forest was darker than the night sky above. The father moved carefully, his flashlight shaking in his hand. Every tree looked the same, tall and endless. Every sound felt louder, as if the forest itself was alive. He followed the small footprints on the ground. Sometimes they disappeared into the mud, then returned again. He bent low, his fingers brushing the dirt. The marks were fresh. His daughter had passed here not long ago, but beside her steps were the strange claw-like tracks. Long grooves in the soil, heavy and deep. They didn't belong to any animal he had ever known. The forest felt less like home and more like a trap. The father's breath grew heavy as he pushed deeper into the woods. Branches tore at his clothes, and thorns scratched his skin. The silence around him grew heavy, broken only by the beating of his heart. Then, suddenly, a distant hum filled the air. He froze, holding his breath. The sound was low at first, then grew louder. It was not the wind, not the rustling of trees. It was a machine, humming with unnatural energy. He crouched low and crept toward the noise. The glow of blue light flickered between the trees. Step by step he moved, his boots sinking into the wet earth. When he reached a clearing, his eyes widened in shock. Before him stood a massive object, half buried in the ground. It was shaped like no plane, no helicopter, no craft from Earth. Metal plates shone with soft blue patterns, pulsing like veins of light. The air around it smelled like smoke and ozone, sharp and strange. It was a pod, but not from this world. Its surface was scarred, as if it had crashed from the sky. Vines and dirt covered its sides, but the light still glowed strong. He felt its warmth even from several steps away. Cautiously, he stepped closer. Strange symbols ran across the hall. Glowing faintly, he touched one with his hand, and it vibrated under his skin. For a moment, he thought he heard whispers, like voices carried by the wind. He pulled his hand back, his chest rising and falling fast. Inside the pod's broken doorway, he saw shadows. He leaned in, shining his flashlight. Inside were metal pieces, strange devices, and glowing maps on screens. He stepped closer, his eyes fixed on one glowing map. It showed the forest around him, but marked with red points of light. One of the red points moved slowly, pulsing brighter and brighter. His stomach dropped. Was it tracking his daughter? Suddenly, a branch snapped behind him. The father spun around, heart pounding. His flashlight caught the outline of a figure, standing in the trees. But in an instant, the figure moved, fast as a shadow. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling but loud. Only silence answered, broken by the faint hum of the pod. He backed away slowly, eyes scanning the darkness. Every instinct screamed at him. He was being watched. He turned his gaze back to the pod. Something inside shifted, as if alive. A panel slid open on its own, glowing symbols flashing faster. Then a sharp sound cut through the air, a metallic screech from above. He dropped to the ground, covering his head. A drone-like machine flew overhead, glowing with the same blue light. It scanned the forest with a red beam, moving methodically across the ground. The father held his breath, praying it would not see him. The drone passed, but it circled back. Its red light came closer, sweeping across the pod. The father crawled behind a fallen log, heart slamming in his chest. The beam touched the ground inches from his boots. Then, suddenly, a different sound echoed in the forest. Louder, sharper, like voices calling to each other. Shapes moved in the shadows, tall figures with glowing armor. They carried weapons that hummed like electricity in the night. The father's throat went dry. These were not humans. Not soldiers, he knew. They were hunters, scanning the forest, searching for something. He realized in horror, they were tracking the same footprints as him. He stayed low, watching from behind the log. The hunters spread out, their lights sweeping every corner. One of them knelt down, touching the footprints. His daughter left. The hunter let out a strange clicking sound, like language. The father knew he could not stay here. He had to move before they found him. He crawled backward slowly, his body shaking, but his boot pressed on a twig, snapping it loud in the silence. The nearest hunter turned its head. Its mask glowed red, and the beam of its weapon scanned the trees. The father pressed himself flat to the earth, barely breathing. The hunter paused, then turned away, moving back to its group. The father exhaled, his lungs burning. He realized one truth: he was not the only one searching. The hunters wanted the same thing he did, And if they found her, first, his daughter was lost forever. He looked once more at the glowing pod, the map inside, the machines, the clues, they were all connected. Somehow this alien wreck held the path to his daughter, but to reach her, he would have to survive. The hunters first. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stand. His legs trembled, his breath shook, but his eyes burned with fire. The chase had begun, and there was no turning back. Somewhere ahead, his daughter was waiting, and he would not stop until he found her. The forest grew heavier with every step he took. The air felt thick, the silence pressing against his ears. The father pushed forward, his flashlight dimming with each passing minute. His body was tired, but the fire in his heart kept him moving. He followed the strange tracks that twisted through the woods. The claw marks sank deep into the soil, sharp and heavy. They led him down into a valley, where the trees leaned close together. It was a place where no sound of birds or insects remained. He crouched low, moving carefully. Ahead, he saw a faint glow flickering between the branches, orange light, rising and falling, like fire. His chest tightened. Someone had made a camp. Slowly, he crawled forward, hiding behind roots and stones. The fire burned in a circle of rocks, its smoke rising into the night. Strange figures stood around it, their tall shapes armored and shining. Their voices clicked and hissed like insects. Carrying through the trees, the father held his breath, eyes sharp. Then he saw something that made his blood turn cold. Beside the fire, a small cage stood, made of metal bars. Inside the cage, a figure sat curled in the corner. He leaned closer, squinting. It was not his daughter, but a girl unlike any he had ever seen. Her skin was soft blue, glowing faintly in the firelight. Her eyes shimmered, like liquid silver, wide with fear. She looked young, no older than his daughter. Her long dark hair hung over her face, tangled and dirty. Her small hands gripped the bars of the cage, trembling when she lifted her head. Their eyes met through the shadows. The father froze, his breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary prisoner. This was an alien child. She tried to speak, her voice soft, musical, but broken. He could not understand her words. Yet her fear was clear. The hunters stood close, their armor glowing red at the joints. They checked their weapons, long spears that hummed with energy. One of them pointed at the cage, speaking in sharp clicks. The girl shrank back, pressing herself against the bars. The father's fists clenched, anger boiling inside him. They treated her like an animal, like she was less than alive. But why would they lock her up? What did she mean to them? And how was she connected to his missing daughter? He stayed hidden, forcing himself not to rush forward. If they saw him now, he would die before taking a step. Instead, he watched closely, memorizing every detail. The camp, the weapons, the hunters' movements. The alien girl's silver eyes searched the darkness. It was as if she sensed him watching. She pressed her hand against the bars, whispering a sound. The sound carried through the forest, soft but full of pain. The father felt a sharp pull in his chest. She was a prisoner, like his daughter must be. And maybe, just maybe, she knew something. Perhaps she could lead him to the truth, but rescuing her would not be easy. The hunters guarded her cage closely, their heads scanning the trees every few minutes. A drone passed overhead, its red beam searching the camp, keeping everything under control. The father crouched low, his mind racing. If he could wait until the fire burned lower, he might have a chance, but his time was short. Every second his daughter was still in danger. He had to act soon, before the hunters moved again. He studied the cage carefully. Its bars glowed faintly, powered by strange energy. It wasn't locked with keys, but with glowing symbols. He realized he would need more than strength to open it. The girl pressed her hands together, making a small light appear. It glowed like a spark, tiny but bright. She pointed at the lock, her eyes pleading. The father understood. She wanted him to free her. He crawled back into the trees, his heart pounding. He needed a plan, something fast, something quiet. But before he could think further, one of the hunters turned. Its glowing mask scanned the trees, and it froze in place. The father dropped to the ground, barely breathing. The hunter's weapon hummed, its red light slicing through the dark. The beam swept close, passing over the log where he hid. The sound of his heartbeat felt louder than the fire crackling nearby. After a long moment, the hunter turned back. The father's muscles ached from holding still. He swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his face. He knew now rescuing the alien girl meant risking everything. But the choice was already made inside him. He could not leave her in that cage, not with eyes that cried for help. If he saved her, maybe she could show him the path to his daughter, and if he didn't, he might lose both of them forever. The night stretched on, the fire burning low. The hunters settled into watchful silence, their shadows long against the flames. The father tightened his grip on a broken branch, sharp at one end. He whispered to himself, steadying his courage. "Hold on," he murmured under his breath, his eyes on the cage. "I will get you out. I will not let them keep you here." And with that vow burning in his chest, he prepared to strike, ready to risk his life for a stranger with silver eyes. The father waited in the darkness, his body tense as stone. The hunters moved slowly around the fire, their glowing armor pulsing with strange light. The alien girl remained trapped in the cage, her silver eyes wide with fear. She looked toward the trees, as if hoping he would appear. The father knew time was slipping away. He had to free her before the hunters moved again. But danger filled the camp like smoke. One wrong step, and his life would end here. He gripped the broken branch in his hand. It was a poor weapon against armored giants, but it was all he had. He studied their movements, counting every step, every turn. They spoke in clicks and hisses, their voices cold and inhuman. Then, from the shadows, a new sound echoed. Metallic footsteps, heavy and sharp. The hunters turned as three more figures entered the clearing. These were different, taller, stronger, their weapons humming with red light. The father's stomach sank. He thought there were only a few, but now their numbers grew. The new arrivals inspected the cage. One of them struck the bars, sending sparks into the air. The alien girl flinched, pressing herself against the corner. She cried out softly, her voice breaking in fear. The leader of the hunters hissed something. The others laughed in sharp, clicking tones. The father's anger burned like fire. Every second watching her suffer tore at his heart, but he forced himself to stay still. Rushing in now would mean certain death. One of the hunters raised a device to the sky. It projected a red beam into the clouds above. The night filled with a sharp hum. Moments later, more drones appeared, flying like vultures in the air. The father's chest tightened. The forest was crawling with enemies. They were not just searching, they were hunting with precision, and he realized in horror that they were after two things, not one. The alien girl was their prisoner, but his daughter. His daughter was still out there. If they captured her, she would end up in a cage just like this. The thought made his hands shake with rage. Suddenly, the girl pressed her glowing hands against the bars. Light flickered from her palms, sparking against the lock. The hunters shouted in their strange tongue, rushing to the cage. She stopped instantly, her small frame trembling with exhaustion. The father understood. She was trying to break free, but she was too weak. If he did not help her soon, she would not survive the night. His daughter's path might depend on saving this girl first. He shifted closer, crawling through the thick undergrowth. Every leaf he touched crackled like thunder in his ears. The hunter's shadow stretched long in the firelight. He could see the glow of their weapons, feel the heat of their presence. Then a sharp noise cut through the night, not from the hunters, but from deeper in the forest. A scream, distant, human, echoing through the trees. The father's heart stopped. It was his daughter's voice, faint but clear. She was alive, but she was close. The hunters reacted instantly, their heads snapping toward the sound. They spread out, shouting in their clicking language. Half of them rushed into the trees. their weapons glowing brighter as they vanished into the darkness. The father's heart raced, torn between two choices: follow the hunters toward his daughter, or free the alien girl now. He looked back at her. She stared at him through the bars, her silver eyes begging for help. Her lips moved silently, whispering something he could not hear, but he felt her meaning in his chest, a silent cry, "Please." The father made his choice. He crept from his hiding place, moving closer to the cage. The fire crackled, covering the sound of his steps. The remaining hunters stood with their backs turned. Distracted, he reached the cage, his hands trembling. The lock glowed with shifting symbols, pulsing like veins. The alien girl raised her glowing hand, pressing it against the pattern. She looked at him, nodding once. He pressed his palm over hers. The cage vibrated, the light burning against his skin. The hunters turned at the sudden noise, their heads snapping toward them. The father pushed harder. His teeth clenched. With a sharp flash, the lock broke open. The bars flickered, then vanished like smoke. The alien girl stumbled forward, free at last, but the hunters roared, their weapons charging with deadly light. The father grabbed her hand, pulling her into the shadows. The hunters charged, their footsteps pounding the earth. The drones above spun their red beams wildly through the trees. The night exploded with chaos, fire, and shouting. The father ran with all his strength. The girl followed close, her glowing eyes wide with fear. Branches whipped at their faces. The ground shook with pursuit. Behind them, the hunters roared like predators denied their prey. Every step felt like the edge of survival. Every breath felt stolen, snatched from death itself. The forest closed around them, black and endless. But the father swore to himself he would not let go of her hand. Enemies surrounded them from every side. But he would fight. He would run. He would not stop. For the girl he had freed, and for the daughter still waiting. The shadows of the forest swallowed them whole, and the chase began again. Asterisk, the night shook with chaos. The father held the alien girl's hand as they ran. Behind them, the hunters' cries echoed through the forest. Sharp and cold, drones hovered. Above, their red beams sweeping the ground like hunting dogs. Every step was heavy, every breath sharp. The forest roots caught at his boots, branches whipped his face. The girl stumbled, but never let go of his hand. Her glowing eyes shone like silver lanterns in the dark. The hunters were fast, their armored steps crashing closer. One raised its weapon, firing a streak of red light through the trees. The beam struck a trunk beside them, exploding in sparks. The father pulled the girl down. Rolling across the dirt, he pressed her close, whispering to stay quiet. The hunters passed only feet away, their lights cutting through the shadows. He waited, his heart hammering. Then, when the path cleared, he pulled her back to her feet. They ran again, deeper into the forest. The air smelled of smoke, and the sound of machines followed close behind. The girl looked back once, her face pale with fear. She spoke something in her strange tongue, her voice trembling. He couldn't understand the words, but he understood her meaning. Danger was everywhere. He nodded, squeezing her hand. Together, they pushed forward into the unknown. After what felt like forever, they reached a ravine. The earth split open into a deep crack. A river rushed below, dark and violent. The only way across was a fallen tree, stretching like a bridge. The father hesitated, looking at the unstable log. But the sound of hunters crashing through the forest grew louder. There was no choice. He lifted the girl onto the trunk and followed carefully. The tree creaked beneath their weight. The water below roared, black and hungry. Halfway across, the girl froze, her small body trembling, her eyes wide, her hands gripping the trunk in fear. The father crouched behind her. "Don't look down," he whispered, though she couldn't understand. He touched her shoulder, steadying her. Step by step, he guided her across. Suddenly, a red beam slashed past them. The hunters had reached the edge of the ravine. Their weapons glowed, lighting the night with deadly fire. The father pushed the girl forward, shouting at her to run. They reached the other side. stumbling onto solid ground, but the hunters began to cross the trunk too. Their armored feet shook the tree with every step. The father grabbed a heavy rock, his jaw tight with fury. He swung with all his strength. The rock smashed against the trunk, cracking the wood. The hunters shouted, their balance slipping. The tree split, crashing into the river below. The hunters fell, swallowed by the dark water. Their red lights vanished into the depths. The father and the girl stood trembling at the edge. They were safe, but only for a moment. He turned to the girl, her face pale in the moonlight. She looked at him, her eyes full of questions. She pressed her glowing hands against his arm. Warmth spread through his skin, easing the pain in his muscles. He stared at her in shock. She had healed him, even just a little. Her powers were real, more than he had imagined. She was not just a victim, she was something far greater. Before he could speak, the sound of more drones filled the sky. They ducked into the trees again, running until their lungs burned. Finally, they reached a hollow beneath an old oak. The father pulled her inside, covering the entrance with branches. For the first time since the chase began, silence surrounded them. The girl curled against the earth. Shivering from fear and exhaustion, he sat beside her, his chest rising and falling like a drum. The night outside still echoed with distant hums. He looked at her again, really seeing her now. Her silver eyes glistened, her face young but full of sorrow. She whispered softly, pointing at the stars above. He followed her finger, wondering what she was trying to tell him. Her words were broken, but he caught fragments. Something about home, something about taken. Tears welled in her eyes, sliding down her blue skin. The father understood enough she was stolen, just like his daughter. A bond formed in that silence. Two strangers, both broken by the same enemy. He touched his chest, then pointed to her. Slowly, she mirrored the gesture, as if promising trust. But before rest could come, the forest shifted again. A howl of machines echoed closer, louder. The hunters had not drowned, and the chase was not over. The father tightened, his grip on her hand, his eyes burning with fire. "We keep moving," he whispered under his breath. She didn't know the words, but she nodded. Together they crawled out of the hollow. The forest swallowed them once more. The night stretched on, endless and merciless. But they were no longer just running. They were escaping together. Two lives, bound by fate. And the father knew deep inside, this girl might be the only key to saving his daughter. The forest grew quieter as dawn approached. The father and the alien girl moved carefully, every step heavy with exhaustion. Their bodies ached, but neither of them stopped. The hunters were still searching, their voices and drones echoing in the distance. At last, they reached a rocky cliff that overlooked the valley. The rising sun painted the trees gold, but its light felt cold. The father guided the girl to sit beneath a stone ledge. For the first time since their escape, they caught their breath. The girl's silver eyes studied the horizon. She pointed toward the mountains beyond the forest. Her lips moved, her voice soft and broken. He could not understand her words, but he felt her urgency. The father frowned, trying to make sense of it. He pointed to himself, then to her, then to the distance. Her expression lit up. She nodded quickly. She touched her chest, whispered her name, though it was strange on his ears. He repeated it clumsily, earning a faint smile from her. Then he tapped his chest, saying his own name. Her silver eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't look afraid. The bond between them grew stronger, even without words, but the silence did not last long. The girl pressed her hands together, creating a faint light. She reached out, touching his forehead with glowing fingers. Suddenly, the father gasped as visions filled his mind. He saw stars stretching across the dark. He saw great ships flying through space, burning with light. He saw a world covered in rivers of silver and skies of violet, and he saw the hunters tearing through that world like shadows. The visions shifted, faster, sharper. He saw children dragged from their families, locked in cages. He saw experiments, cruel machines, blood and fire, and he saw the alien girl herself, crying as they stole her away. The father stumbled back, his heart racing. The girl pulled her hand away, her face pale with sorrow. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered. He could not understand the words, but he knew the meaning. She was stolen. Then the visions returned. This time he saw his own daughter, trapped in a cage like the alien girl, her small hands banging against metal bars, her voice screaming. The hunters stood nearby, their glowing masks cold and merciless. The father's body shook with rage. He reached out, gripping the girl's shoulders, desperate. "Where?" he demanded, his voice breaking. She raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the mountains. He understood his daughter was there. The hunters had taken both children to the same place. The alien girl's escape was not a mistake. It was fate. She was the only one who could guide him to her. But there was more. The girl pressed her hands together again. This time the light revealed something different. She showed him blood, glowing with a strange pattern. Her voice trembled as she spoke. The father could not follow the words, but the images were clear. The hunters needed children with rare blood. Blood that carried power, blood that could be used. His stomach twisted in horror. His daughter had been chosen, not by accident. She was taken because her blood carried something the hunters wanted. And if he didn't reach her soon, they would take it from her. The father's eyes burned with fury. He clenched his fists, his breath ragged. He swore to himself he would tear apart the world to bring her back. The girl watched him, her own face full of determination. She touched her chest, then touched his. It was a silent promise, a vow that they would face this together. For the first time, the father felt he was not alone. In this strange nightmare, he had an ally. But the shadows of the forest shifted again. The hum of drones returned, louder this time. Voices clicked through the trees, closer and closer. The hunters had not given up the chase. The father pulled the girl to her feet. There was no more time to rest, no more time to doubt. The truth had been shown, and it was darker than he imagined, but it also gave him strength. As they hurried down the cliffside, he whispered to himself, "They want her blood. They want my daughter's blood, but they will not have it." The girl looked at him, and though she didn't know his words, she nodded. Her silver eyes glowed brighter in the morning sun. The forest ahead was vast and dangerous. The mountains loomed like giants waiting in the distance. Somewhere within them, his daughter was alive. Somewhere within them, the hunters prepared their cruelty. But the father no longer walked in the dark. Now he carried the hidden truth. He knew what he was fighting for, and he knew he would not stop until his daughter was free. The mountains rose high above the forest, their peaks hidden in clouds. The father and the alien girl climbed steadily, their bodies weak but unbroken. Every step brought them closer to danger, but also closer to his daughter. The air was colder here, sharp against their skin, carrying the scent of smoke. As they reached a ridge, the father froze. Below them lay a hidden camp, spread wide across the valley floor. Strange towers glowed, with red lights, humming with power. Cages lined the edges, their bars glowing with the same symbols as before. His chest tightened when his eyes found one cage, a small figure huddled inside, her hands gripping the bars. It was his daughter, her face pale, her hair tangled. Even from this distance, he could hear her weak cry. The father's heart almost broke. For weeks he had chased shadows, and now she was finally there. But the camp was full of hunters, more than he had ever seen. Drones circled the sky, their red beams sweeping across the ground. The alien girl touched his arm, pointing toward the towers. Visions filled his mind once more. The towers were machines, draining energy, using blood as fuel. Children like his daughter, and like the alien girl, were the source. His jaw tightened, rage burning through him. The hunters were not just kidnappers, they were harvesters. They saw children as tools, not lives, and his daughter was about to be their next sacrifice. The father studied the camp carefully. There was no way to fight them all. No way to storm the cages. He would have to use the shadows, the chaos of surprise. But one mistake, and his daughter would be lost forever. The alien girl pressed her glowing hands together. She created a small orb of light, then closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her silver gaze was sharp. She was ready to fight, ready to help him. The father nodded, his breath steadying. They crept down the ridge. Using rocks and trees as cover, the camp grew louder, the hunters' voices clicking in sharp tones. Machines buzzed and pulsed, filling the air with unnatural energy. Finally, they reached the edge of the cages. The father's eyes locked on his daughter. She saw him, her weak face lighting up with hope. She whispered his name, though her voice was faint. He pressed a finger to his lips, promising silence. Then he touched the alien girl's shoulder, pointing at the lock. Her glowing hands reached forward. Pressing against the symbols, the cage vibrated, sparks flying as the bars flickered. But before it could open, a loud roar filled the camp. The hunters had noticed, their weapons humming. With deadly light, the father spun around, gripping a broken piece of metal as a weapon. The first hunter charged, its red mask glowing in the firelight. He swung hard, striking the hunter's chest. The blow staggered it, but did not bring it down. The alien girl raised her hands, sending out a wave of silver light. The hunter screeched, its mask cracking, sparks flying as it fell. But more came, their steps shaking the earth. The camp erupted into chaos, drones diving from the sky. The father shouted at his daughter, pulling her from the cage. She stumbled into his arms, tears streaming down her face. For one brief moment, he felt complete again. His daughter was safe in his arms. Her heart beat against his chest. But the hunters were everywhere, surrounding them like wolves. Escape seemed impossible. The walls of the camp closing in, the alien girl stepped forward, her silver eyes burning. Light burst from her hands, brighter than the sun. The hunters shielded their faces, stumbling back in shock, but the girl's body shook, the light draining her strength. The father realized what she was doing. She was giving everything she had, using her power to protect them. If she kept going, it would destroy her. She was choosing to sacrifice herself so they could live. No, the father whispered, his heart breaking. He pulled her back, his own body shielding hers. You're not alone, not anymore, he said, though she couldn't understand. But his eyes told her the truth. He would not let her die here. The hunters regrouped, their weapons charging again. The father stood tall, his daughter behind him, the alien girl at his side. He had no great weapon, no armor, no plan, but he had courage, and he had something the hunters would never understand. He raised his makeshift weapon, his voice fierce. If I fall fighting for them, he whispered under his breath. The alien girl touched his hand, adding her silver glow. Together, they faced the circle of enemies. The battle raged, fire and light tearing through the camp. The father fought with desperate strength, striking, blocking, surviving. The alien girl blinded the hunters again and again with bursts of light. His daughter clung to the cage, her voice crying out his name. The night stretched long, chaos all around, but in the end, one truth burned brighter than all the fear. He had saved the alien girl, and he had found his daughter. The cost was heavy, the danger far from over. As the fires died down, the camp lay in ruin. The hunters had fallen back, retreating into the shadows. The father held his daughter close, his arms shaking with relief. The alien girl stood beside them, her silver eyes still glowing faintly. He looked at both of them, his heart torn. He had found his daughter, but now another child depended on him too. He could not abandon the alien girl to the hunter's cruelty, and he could not risk his daughter's life again. The path ahead was uncertain. More enemies would come, more battles would follow, but the father knew one thing with absolute clarity. The choice had been made. He would protect them both, whatever the cost.